Yes, that is right. The Survivor Know-It-Alls are here. 20-year anniversary of Survivor Borneo. Stephen Fishback, how are you?
What a crazy, the fact that, 20 years have gone by. I mean, I still remember incredibly well, running home every Thursday. I was
Wednesday.
subletting Wednesday.
Yeah.
Wednesday, right. I was subletting an apartment in Murray Hill. I was working as an intern at Simon and Schuster, and I'd come home and cheer on Richard Hatch. This huge villain who everyone hated but was so diabolical. And I mean, just now to be talking about him, part of that community, to have like hung out with Richard, like gone to his home, played with Kelly Wigglesworth, like run that first challenge with, against Kelly Wigglesworth, voted Kelly Wigglesworth out of the game. I mean, it's such a cool thing, just like, and to take now and look back on this 20-year history, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. Stephen, did you watch the Survivor in the first season? You read that's a true story?
I was obsessed. Like I came home every night. I was just crazy about it. I was, very much involved in those water cooler conversations in the office. I was in an office that had a water cooler. I mean, I still might talk near it. Yeah.
It was water cooler show.
Yeah.
First of its kind. All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about the first episode of Survivor, talk about what was going on there, try to give it the know-it-alls treatment as we celebrate 20 years of Survivor all summer long. Josh Wigler and I are going to be going back and watching old episodes of Survivor. We will have a weekly wand-off also as part of that, and we'll have those on Mondays. We are blessed, though, to have Stephen Fishback give us a know-it-alls here on the anniversary of Survivor Borneo.
Wow, blessed. I mean, that's an exact one.
Well, I'm saying that we're especially blessed. I mean, you're not going to do this every week.
Yeah. But this is so fun. I mean, when you suggested this, I thought it was such a fun idea. What was your experience like first season of Survivor? Because I knew you were a fan out of the gate too.
Yeah. Well, I was a fan, but I wasn't there on night one. It took me 4 episodes to ultimately find the show. I had heard about it. I heard about the buzz, and I knew I wanted to get in. And it was love at first sight when I watched episode 4. That was my first experience with the show.
So how did you? I mean, because there was no like internet back then. There
just
was
word of mouth. Word of mouth.
How did you? Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was at college, and then I heard a lot of buzz about it. People talking about it on the radio and stuff like that. So I had to make sure that once I got home and I had nothing else going on, I was like, I'll be there Wednesday.
How did you go back and watch the first 3 episodes? Because you really couldn't. It wasn't possible back then.
I didn't see them until like many years later.
Was this the first time you watched the first episode?
No, I mean, of course, I've seen it all from before, and then also when I did the rewatch with Josh Wigler on the evolution of strategy. By the way, chapter 1 is available completely for free at evolutionofstrategy.com. But yeah, I think that they reran all the episodes in August of that year up against the Olympics. And so I ended up seeing them at that time.
Interesting. I mean, it's funny, I actually rewatched this episode about 5 years ago. I was just curious. It was shortly before I went on again. And I thought it would be like interesting to see kind of like what those early episodes were like. And I mean, I actually found it like really slow and boring watching it 5 years ago. Honestly, like rewatching it today for this podcast, I loved it. Like I loved its slowness. I loved the kind of emphasis it had on the survival element, on these like personalities, the ukulele players. I loved the luxury items they had. And I honestly think that part of why that is just because of sort of like the simplicity of this episode, almost like the sweetness of it was like, it just seemed like to take me back to a different era.
Yeah, well, I think it's just the opposite of what you're used to. The grass is always greener. That we're in an era of Survivor where everything is so fast and jam-packed. This is slow. This breathes. You really get to know. There's only 16 people. So I think that it's really the contrast of where Survivor is after 40 seasons.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing Dirk having his Bible was really cool, and like that scene of him being, and just look at all that stuff they had. When I rewatched this 5 years ago, I was like outraged, like oh my, like all these supplies. They had medical supplies, they had plastic bags, they had sunglasses, all of this food that they had was just unbelievable. But now watching it. So when I rewatched it for the first time, I kind of was like incredibly jealous of that experience. But now rewatching it this time, I just as a viewer, it seemed like like that is more. I felt like there was so much more characterization, you know, from the person who's got the Bible to the person who brought, you know, whatever, the toothbrush, you know, like it just, you felt like you were more connected to these people as humans.
Steven, did you have a luxury item in Survivor Tocantins?
Yeah, I'm actually curious about you guys, but so by the time you got to Tocantins, like you had to send in some item that was basically, it could have no practical value.
Yeah.
It had to be like sentimental, but have like no utility. So like I kept on trying, like the first things I tried to send were like, I tried to send in like a book of Shakespeare. You know, I thought that would be like, you know, characterization. But they didn't allow that because, you know, that could be used for fire. Well, I also thought it could be used for fire, you know, for starting fires.
If it was a bad one.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That would have been a bad look to be setting fire to literature on TV, burning books on that.
Hey, Rudy says about the Bible. He says a couple episodes later, he's like, you know, Dirk, he's got the Bible, and the only reason that anybody should have a Bible out here would be for, you know, for toilet paper. That's one of Rudy's famous quotes.
That's great.
So great to see the late great Rudy.
Yeah. Yeah, really, it was great to see him in his prime. So then I tried to like send in like cards, like for similar reasons.
Like Jervis.
It was his cards.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hadn't, ultimately it was like, the only thing in my apartment that they would accept was basically this little like Tintin statuette, which had no sentimental value for me, but was like literally
Tintin. That's the dog.
No, he's like the French boy who goes on adventures.
Yes.
Tintin. So I like was like, oh, this is representative to me of this wonderful adventure that I am going on. But like truly, I was like, went item by item through my apartment, like trying to find something that they would accept. What was it like for you in the Amazon?
So in my season, we had to basically like submit a list, and I think I probably had like I think my list was something like the bell, the magic 8 ball.
Oh, the 8 ball, of course. What am I even asking? Yeah.
The Etch-a-Sketch. It was just like all like dumb random stuff. And the bell, I think, would have just killed audio on the production. So I don't even think that was an option. And so I just wanted like things that were going to be like fun to play with.
So you were doing the bell even back in 2003 or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. Back from when I was in college. So back around the time, even predating probably when I started watching Survivor.
What was the context in your life of the bell?
So I had always, you know, I watch a lot of game shows, and so that's one of the reasons. But it all ties into, you know, my fascination with Survivor, because I felt like, as the great Colleen Haskell said once upon a time, oh, this is a game show. And so I loved game shows, and so I had like a couple of like game shows, and I had bought the Family Feud home game on I think off eBay sometime in like 1998 or 1999, and then as part of like playing that game, wouldn't it be great to also yes, that's right, that answer is on the board. And so that was really the origin story of why I had the bell. And the first bell I ever had got smashed against the wall by one of my college roommates, Greg Pinto, who in a fit of rage broke the very first bell. And luckily for me, they were like $4 at Staples. So I just got another one.
Yeah, who could have imagined that the yes, that answer is on the board was not a hit with the college crowd?
No, it was not a hit. But Survivor was a hit, and it was a juggernaut. Maybe not on its very first night here, where we got to see May 31st, 2000. And at one point, Steven and I were talking about, should we play this whole podcast as if it were the year 2000?
Yeah, I mean, because like, you know, not knowing who's sorry, I'm trying to like, I'm maneuvering out of the light, so there's like less glare. I'm like getting crazy glare. Yeah, because it's kind of like, I think like it would be an interesting thought experiment to like not know, in quotes, like who's going to win, like, you know, based on this episode and based on the other 39 seasons of Survivor, like who you think is going to win. But it's sort of, you get into like some very complicated mental knots very fast.
Yeah, it's like maybe like this is we've somehow like linked up, and we have a tape recorder, and somehow you're hearing the audio cassette of me talking with Steven Fishback back in the year 2000. But anyway, I guess so. Let's just talk this through as if this was a know-it-alls. And so we have Steven. Sonia ends up being the first player voted out of the game. First off, was this the right call for the Tagi tribe to vote Sonia out?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, I think that, just she obviously, was great for morale, but I think she, the fact that she really stumbled in that first challenge, and I think at this stage in the game, you've got to expect this is like, this is a real alliance, going to be a really alliance heavy game. Although alliances had yet to be invented at this point, but like looking towards the merge, I think you have to think like, hey, our tribe is going to stay together against their tribe. I think it makes sense to vote out someone who might be like repeatedly hampering you. And it was such a close physical challenge.
Yeah. I think it's a close vote. It was a 4-3-1 vote.
Oh, well, we got to talk about the vote for sure. But the challenge itself was so close, and it really did seem like Sonia cost them the win there. And just in terms of like who's showing loyalty to who, right? I think for Sue to kind of, she's kind of like casting her lot with one group versus a different group. So I think, Sue, it looks like, was the swing vote on this vote. And I think for Sue, this is the right choice, because for Sue, she's choosing, am I going to be with like Stacey and Kelly? And like, they're never going to be like BFFs with Sue, right? Or am I going to be with like the guys like Rudy and, Sean and Dirk? And it did seem like Sue maybe more gravitated to those people and was going to like fit in more naturally with them.
Yeah. The 4 votes for Sonia end up being Rudy, Sue, Sean, and Dirk. And also Sue is approached by Kelly and Stacey and Kelly, Stacey, and Sonia, I guess would have been the 3 votes for Rudy. Sue would have been the 4th vote for Rudy had she ultimately gone with voting Rudy. And Rudy, of course, becomes a trusted ally of Sue.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you're right. If you have not watched this within the past day, the important context here is that Sue remarks that Kelly and Stacey are getting really close, and they want to vote out Rudy because he's too grouchy and barks orders all the time. So like it seems like Sue is kind of the swing. Like she can either go with this alliance of Kelly and Stacey, who again, like I don't like, she's just not naturally going to fit with, or she can vote with the guys who all vote for Sonia. And in fact, it is, other than Sue, right? It's a gender split vote, except for Richard, who does not vote in either of these 2 voting blocks. Richard votes for Stacey. He says like complicated reasons. I don't know exactly what they are. Now, what did you make of Richard's vote for Stacey here?
I don't know. It really was, some weirdness here. First off, it's a miracle. How does Richard escape the vote here? I guess that we find out that, him and Rudy develop a relationship. I guess he was good in the challenge, but he certainly is getting on people's nerves there in the early going of the game. And so for Richard, I think this was a miracle that he survives that first tribal council without a vote. Yeah.
I mean, it really, out of the gate, right? Like he's being sort of bossy. Like everyone is trying to talk about, where to make shelter, where to sleep. And Richard wants to talk about like the process behind their decision making, which is just like not reading the room at all, right? These are a bunch of like young kind of survival focused people, young and old, but all kind of like focused on the question of survival, the task at hand. And he wants to, kind of have like a meeting about meetings.
Yeah, have a meeting about meetings. So let's just talk this through. Is we know Richard's going to go on to be the winner. Was this a good move or not?
Was what a good move for them not to vote Richard out?
No, but well, let's talk about Richard. He gets to the beach, he parks himself. It's such a great, iconic, classic scene in the show. Richard sits up in the tree like the Cheshire Cat and is like, "Look, we got to talk about things." And Sue is going back and forth with him, like, "Yeah, what? We don't need to talk. We just need to do stuff." He's like, "Well, I disagree. We need to go through this." Do you think? Did Rich do a good job of setting himself up as a leader here?
No, Richard did a terrible job. I mean, in this first episode, he really positions himself as an outcast. If this were certainly a contemporary season of Survivor, you would think that Richard was definitely going to be gone now and definitely not going to win. Like not a winner's edit, for Richard Hatch here out of the gate. He really sets himself up as an outcast. There's a number of shots of him very like physically very separate from the group. Even when he rejoins them, he like lectures that, you know, he sits everyone down when he finally rejoins the group and like basically sits them down. It's like, now do you understand what I was talking about? How we all have to make decisions together. You know, he basically like lectures them for not listening to him better. Yeah, I mean, I think that inherently is going to isolate him from the group. I mean, what do you think, Rob? Like, not a great strategic move out of the gate.
I don't know. I'm wondering if it's sort of like counterintuitive, where there seemed to have been a vacuum of leadership on that tribe. That isn't it better for somebody to step into that role, even if we sort of say like, okay, he could have handled it better. I mean, this tribe is going off in all these different directions. I think that, you know, this tribe ends up kind of like the organized, orderly tribe. Do they get there without those early conversations?
Rob, I think that's results-oriented thinking. You know, we know Richard wins, so clearly he's doing it right. If this were any other season of Survivor, if we're watching it fresh, I think we have to say, you know, by not being a chameleon, by forcing his presence on the group. Now, obviously, it is the first season, so no one has any freaking clue what they're doing. Maybe you're right. Like for this one season only, this can work.
So this is tricky to talk about season 1, episode 1, because we know where the game is now in season 1. So that's one way we could talk about things, about how, like, okay, for this group of people, what Richard did was a bad idea. But through the lens of hindsight, like if this was season 40 and Richard came out and did this, also a bad move?
I mean, yeah, a worse move in season 40 than in season 1. Like
he's on to call and he's like, look, everyone over here, Tony's doing his own thing. Everyone, Tyson's doing his thing. Yule's doing his thing. We need to talk about this. So, I mean, I actually do agree with you. Like that here on I mean, obviously this is the right move because it works, right? Speaking of results-oriented thinking. But I do think that here on the first season, sorry about this glare, where nobody has any idea what they're doing, like truly no one has any clue what they're doing, that to come out of the gate and be like, hey, I'm willing to put my neck out there, I'm willing to be a leader, is a strong move. And it puts Richard in a good position later in the game to both like guide people, to create an alliance, and then ultimately to be the victor in that alliance. And we see for like the first 10 seasons of Survivor that people in leadership positions do fairly well, right? I mean, at some point that kind of flips itself, but I mean, when does that flip? I mean, probably, I don't know, like season 15 or something, you know, like for the first half of the show, I would say, it was not a bad thing to be a leader. It was not a bad thing to be a leader sometimes. I think that by the time you get to Survivor Marquesas and Boston Rob votes out Hunter, you know, I think that there's definitely a backlash forming against people in the leadership. Roger. Certainly by the Amazon. I'm like, okay, good. Let this guy get out in front and be the leader. But to keep this on Richard ends up voting here for Stacey. And he says when he votes for Stacey, he says that, he doesn't even know why. A lot of reasons. And he doesn't even know all of them. Did Richard throw his vote away here? So it's interesting strategically because obviously votes worked very differently back then, where if someone had more votes on them in a tie, right, they would be, had that been instituted? I don't think so. There was no tie other than there's a 2-2 tie at the final 4, and then Kelly just flips her vote. I don't know if the tiebreak rules had been firmly established. Is it possible? Did nobody talk to Richard about the first vote? It's possible that Richard was so far out of it that he didn't know. It's possible that he didn't, that it was sort of like he was kind of like fingering the next target, you know, being like Stacey goes next. It's also possible that, I don't know. I mean, if it's strategic, right? Like if someone did that now, we would say that was a misplay, right? Where like, because they're getting ire on them for voting, you know, for basically they're creating dissension with a person who's going to be coming back to the tribe. But at this point in the game, you know, maybe it puts the target on Stacey. Maybe I mean, or maybe he just didn't know. Yeah, it's a good question of why does he cast that vote for Stacey there at that first tribal council? Sonia ends up that we talked about. She's a liability in the challenges. Sonia in season 1, is she more of a liability in the challenges than she is circa season 40?
Well, yeah, probably, because it like looked like they were more like physical challenges, right? Like now all the challenges have kind of a rubber
Puzzle
banding
component. Yeah.
Yeah, and John Kerhofer just had an interview, I think, with the great Mike Bloom, where he was talking about how in season 1, you know, in the early seasons, you could have just like blowout challenges, and now they had created, now they added in, you know, puzzles and carnival games to be kind of equalizers. So I think, yeah, Sonia's probably a bigger liability in these seasons than she would be today. What do you think?
Yeah, I probably would agree with that. I'm trying to think of like what the rest of the challenges are in, but if you have to do like some things where it's like get everybody out in the water to go swim, I think it's probably not much of a difference in season. If you have somebody who is as bad in the one challenge we see her in as Sonia is, I don't think it makes a big difference.
Well, the other issue is that in these in the early seasons, right, it's more like everyone having to do something together. Whereas in later seasons, typically there's a split. So like the puzzle makers are not going to have to do the super physical part of the challenge. So like, I think there's more an opportunity for someone like Sonia. And I certainly saw that in my season, where we would have like a few physically weaker players who would be on the puzzle, right? Like Sierra, who's like much smaller, would like often be like the puzzle, and who's incredible at puzzles. Like she never held back our tribe because we would just put her on the puzzle.
So Stacey ends up talking to Kelly. They're trying to get some sort of a women's alliance together from the jump. Here in Survivor season 1, episode 1, we have the formation of the women's alliance. Sue Hawk doesn't want to go with it. Do you feel like that had Sue Hawk voted with them, do you think that the women could have run Tagi?
I mean, maybe, right? Assuming, because that gets rid of Rudy, right? And the Rudy-Rich relationship is really the sort of core of Richard's alliance. And then instead you've got this Kelly Stacey relationship. We've got a whole alternate history for Survivor here.
How much did Kelly talk fondly about her season 1 Borneo days during your time with Kelly Wigglesworth?
I think that the loss still hurt. I think she felt like some of it was gender based. I think she thought that like some of the guys who were on the jury didn't want to lose to a woman. And I think it still stung for her. This narrow loss that was such an iconic moment in television history, right? Over like allegedly like over 100 million people tuned in for at least some part of that finale. So like this was like this was one of the most viewed episodes of television in the history of television. So to like be to lose in that context, I think was really but it was great. She talked a lot about the different aspects of just how like loose it was, how like they would go show up at challenges and then like they would like leave for a while, go change clothes, come back. It was like a much more free flowing as opposed to the highly efficient production machine it now is.
Did she long for those days when you guys were on Second Chances?
Maybe. I mean, I think she was better suited, like I think her skill set of like outdoorsmanship, being the wilderness guide, she was never like the strategic hustler. She was like the straight shooter, like physical competitor, outdoors person. I think she was better. It was, so I think she did not love, the game that was happening around her.
Yeah. Sue Hawk, it's so nice to see her. Sue Hawk and Kelly ultimately do form a relationship, even though they're not on the same page here in the beginning. It ends up being a relationship that ends up falling apart by the end of the game. I got to spend time with Sue Hawk in Survivor All-Stars, and I loved every moment that I got to spend with Sue Hawk.
Tell me.
She was the best. She was just so fun. She was such an original, and she didn't like where you talk about the chameleons of people that you don't know where they stand. You always know where Sue Hawk stands. That she will tell you to your face. She doesn't like what's going on. She will be pretty straight. Although she did dupe me and vote me out. But I always thought like I had a really good relationship with Sue Hawk.
Yeah. What about Rudy? Because
Well,
you guys spent a lot of time together.
I spent a lot of time with Rudy. That was although that was outside of the game. But I just would listen to Rudy's stories all the time, and he would talk to me all the time, tell me things that I already knew about Richard Hatch, and like a lot. Like, I think he sort of. I don't know if he like sort of like, because those were like the clips, like a lot of like his famous lines. He would say that a lot, but he would always tell me about Survivor All-Stars. He was not happy with the way that Survivor All-Stars went, and he always went through his whole thing about how, out there you had that big mouth Jenna, and then you had Jerry with them pimples on her face, and then Eason, I seen them girls that he's been running around with, and he ain't getting no bargains. And Rupert, that guy, he's a real actor. So he just would go through like his hit tracks of diss track.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I mean, what great characters. Like, every one of these people is so distinct.
They nailed the casting.
Yeah.
For the most part. A couple of misses.
Who are the misses?
Dirk. I always thought that Dirk, I guess that they wanted somebody. I think he was more like just cast for that. He was there for his Bible.
Sorry.
They wanted somebody who was going to be very like, very, very, very religious. And then,
but that's an interesting element, right? I mean, like, I know.
It didn't really play out on the show like they would. Ramona didn't have a lot of big moments in the show. I think she got sick, and but for the most part, I think they pretty much nailed it.
Yeah, great. I mean, do you want to talk about Pagon for a second? Because great. What we see in the foundation of another alliance, which is between Ramona and BB.
Yes. Okay. So on Pagon, we have Ramona and BB go off to go find the well and get lost. Steven, a terrible move from Ramona and BB. Going off looking for the well.
Yeah,
that's an alliance.
Yeah.
I'm surprised that they did not. Well, they were lucky they didn't go to tribal council, because you got to break up that pair.
And they could be looking for idols, even though their idols don't exist yet.
They don't know that yet.
Yeah.
They don't know they're not invented yet.
Yeah, exactly. It's interesting because actually Tyson had said, I think before Heroes versus Villains, that one of his potential strategies was going to be, if he thought he was in trouble, he would hide all the food and the machetes and say, like, if you vote me out, you're out of luck. And you see BB innovate that strategy here. First episode of the game, where he says, hey, if we don't have to tell anyone else where this water well is, we've got the map. We know where the water is. We're in control. What do you think of that? The blackmail strategy,
Yeah, we're the only people that know where the water well is. Do they have to go and get the water? Like, hey, who wants water today? All right, we'll be back. We'll go get it.
What do you? Is that a good strategy, Rob, or is this like a loser?
No, I think it's a loser.
Well, I mean, because they obviously don't execute it, but
yeah, I think that would not work, because you'd have to be the person to go get the water every single day. It's like we're the only people that know where the well is. They had like a map that's like in a Ziploc bag.
I know. I love that they had a Ziploc bag too. I just again, when I saw this again for 5 years ago, like how dare they give these people Ziploc bags? Like we hear all the time, old schoolers complaining about how easy it is these days and how rough they had it. This is a joke how easy these people had it. But it's kind of cool because that's if it were actually a marooning or a survival situation, this is kind of how it would work, right? You'd have a few odds and ends, and you'd be fending off the wilderness with them. I really love this.
You'd have some sort of junk from the plane crash or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You'd have a weird plastic bag, and you'd keep the hand-drawn map to the water well in it.
Yeah. Okay. So there's a lot of focus on BB. We really don't see a ton out of Pagon. We have that scene with Ramona and BB going to go look at the well. And then over on Pagon, we see a lot of the Gretchen and BB dynamic. And BB, he is very focused on, he is going to build the shelter. And, it's funny that we end up seeing a season of Survivor, millennials versus Gen X, but very early on in Survivor, a lot of the the themes that get talked about here in Survivor Borneo, it's that the older generation, and I don't know if you would call them necessarily
Boomer versus Gen X. This is great. Maybe they may be greatest generation, actually.
Yeah. So, it basically is like the group, whatever the group is, like the people in there, the older people versus those lazy Gen Xers.
Yeah, maybe it's too much. Yeah, it is funny. It is funny how it's always like the older versus the young people. But Boomer versus Gen X, classic tribe division.
And Pagon was really the ultimate representation of Gen Xers. BB is not going to be on the show for much longer. He's going to get voted off in the next episode. They're sort of done with BB. And Gretchen is sort of like the one older person stuck with these Gen Xers. And, that the Pagon tribe, they are sort of like the 90s young adults of want to sit around all day, would hang out in Central Perk if they had one. They want to just talk about things all day long and hang out.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting, BB's like nobody is even helping with the shelter, which if we were watching that now, you'd be like, you guys have got to sleep somewhere. Where did they think they were all? I guess they were sleeping in the boat, right? Is that right?
I don't think they cared. They were just all off doing their own thing.
And interesting too that BB was building the shelter right on the beach, which now you typically wouldn't do. You'd typically build it under some tree cover, both to leverage the existing trees as structural supports, and then also so you'd have some shade.
Right. BB is just kind of on a different show. BB is not playing the game, really has no interest in the game. He's I'm here to build a house.
Yeah.
I'm here to build a shelter. Don't tell me what I can't do.
Martin Holmes has a great history of the first season of Survivor or oral history of the first season that he put up on Inside Survivor. And there's some great interviews with Gretchen as part of that, who seems like just a real gem.
Yeah.
And did you know Gretchen through the Survivor community at all?
I only recently, last summer, I talked to her. I have a Talking with T-Bird interview with Gretchen.
Was she a gem? Because she seems like a gem.
She's a really nice lady.
Yeah. And she was saying that BB was just not having it. He signed up for a very different experience. An
adventure.
Yeah. And he
was an adventurer.
Special game. Yeah. Apparently, the reason that it was so easy, maybe this is common knowledge already, the reason it was so easy to make fire with his glasses was that he had them machined so that they were a magnifying glass. Oh
no, I didn't know that at the time, or maybe I knew it and I forgot. I used to have a book that was basically the Mark Burnett story of the first Survivor, and I read the novelization. You should see if you can get Mark Burnett on Paraphrase to talk about the novelization. But I had that book, and I also had the Survivor Wilderness Guide.
Yeah. How was the Survivor Wilderness Guide? Did that prepare you?
I had it. I bought it on eBay. I was buying a lot of stuff on eBay, I guess, in the year 1999 and 2000. And I bought it to look up stuff about how to live on Survivor.
Yeah, and
it's super useful.
Yeah, did you use it for toilet paper?
That the only reason you would bring the Survivor Wilderness Guide would be for toilet paper.
Yeah, I had the book it was around season 2, I think, where he talks about the different archetypes they cast. It's unbelievable how uncanny it is in terms of how elemental the archetypes he's talking about are. Yeah.
What? They're oh, there was a mom.
No, it was the feral child. The feral child has rage against authority, but nevertheless needs to be comforted. It's really deep
Who was the feral child?
I don't know. I mean, who's the feral child this season? I don't know. There's probably one.
I have to ask Angie Kantz. Let's see. Is Kelly Greg?
Maybe it probably is Greg, actually. Yeah, or Colleen.
He's the feral child. Greg and Colleen, almost no screen time. Purple Greg and Colleen here in the first episode.
I know. I was surprised about that as well. Very there's a lot of these iconic relationships, are not even in the show. Perhaps the most iconic relationship that I was surprised by was Sue saying there's nothing wrong with a rat.
Yeah.
Yeah, out of the gate. Doesn't mind rats at this point in the game. Obviously, over time, she comes to really loathe rats.
Right. So, Stephen, there was a ton of rat talk. It was almost like I think that that's really what they were going for. If you were like a 2000s journalist and you were writing a recap of the first episode of Survivor, I think you would be very focused on the rats. I think the rat would probably get at least 3 or 4 paragraphs in your article.
Oh yeah, I mean, you talk about like they used rat, like Richard beheaded a
What
rat.
is this show?
Yeah,
And why are there so many rats around these people?
I remember reading the Salon recaps at the time. You know, we go to salon.com and read their episode recaps, and they called Jeff Probst the king of the koalas, and that was biting.
That must have been next season.
Oh yeah, you're right. Probably was second season. Yeah,
They
called him the king of the rats this time.
On the original run through for you, how the Rat King.
King.
So, did you stay with Survivor for a long time, or were you out after the first couple seasons?
Rob, this is a horrible story to tell right now.
Yes.
I love Survivor season 1. I was so obsessed, and then I watched season 2. I was such a huge fan, but I was such a huge fan of Mike Skupin. And when Mike Skupin got voted out, I was like, I kind of like lost interest in the show. And now I feel really dirty, like having been a fan of Mike Skupin.
Yeah, well, he got burned in the fire. He didn't get voted out.
Not voted out, but got
you were so gutted by his accident that you couldn't watch the show anymore?
I like lost interest. I was like, whatever. Now that Skupin's gone, like, who cares? You know?
So, like, I could understand it a little bit more if he was voted out. I'm like, these people, I'm done with them.
No, I was like
his accident.
Yeah, that scene where he like catches a pig. You know, that was such a cool like TV moment. I mean, I know that I'm like, you know, my archetype is obviously the nerd or whatever, like the feral nerd. But I really liked. As I've evidenced time and again, I love these survivalist guys. You know, the ones who are like hunting the pigs and catching the fish and things.
Yeah. So then, what was your story then with Survivor? Then when you went to go play in Tocantins, were you recruited?
I was recruited. Yeah.
And then did you go back and study the show before you went on?
Oh yeah, I like watched as many seasons as I possibly could. Rob, you were a huge influence of mine. They told that was they were like, you're Rob Sesternino meets Yul Kwan. Watching you play really was incredibly influential for me, because especially your strategy of always going for the stragglers, like picking up the stragglers as your pocket allies. Obviously not so much in All Stars, but in Survivor of the Amazon,
if there were stragglers, I would have picked them up.
Yeah, exactly. But with like Butch and with Matthew and with Dina, even, just like kind of finding the unexpected alliances. So that was very much my conscious strategy going into the game. And it worked out incredibly well for me in terms of like, no one was allied with Taj, so I picked Taj up. No one was allied with Aaron, so I picked Aaron up. And it actually was an awesome, really, like I owe my success in the game to just mimicking you, which seems to be like my success in life as well.
Yeah,
just mirroring what Rob is doing.
I didn't know any of that. That's wild.
Yeah. And also
you talked about me and Yul Kwan, but I always thought that it was that you were pitched as Rob Sesternino and you crossed with Yul Kwan.
I think that's right. Like he's not as funny and interesting as Rob, but he can count better than Rob can. He's like some of Rob's game,
much smarter than Rob. Yes.
Mixed with Yul's boringness, I think was how they specifically pitched me. And I also obviously like Todd was another huge influence of mine.
Yeah.
You, Todd, and Yul were the 3 people I was really modeling my game after.
It's wild. We're learning about Tocantins too today.
Yeah. What about you? Like, what was your you watched straight through? Like, see episode 4 straight through.
I never missed an episode of the show, and then like once I came back, once I started, I don't think I missed an episode the whole way through until I left for Survivor of the Amazon. But really, there wasn't like a main Survivor player that I was that super influenced my game. It was more Dr. Will from Big Brother 2 and Danielle Reyes, and that was also like formative, but Rob Mariano was probably the biggest influence on me, but more in the confessional where that I just felt like that he connected with the audience in a way where that he talked to them. And I don't know where necessarily he got that from, that was just naturally his thing, where he talked to basically the person at home as if they were like, hey, all right, so here's what I'm doing. And you know, you don't really get that here in the first season.
Yeah, it's the confessionals are very kind of like
they're being interviewed.
Yeah, exactly. It's still everyone's a little bit like uncomfortable around. I mean, now people are too comfortable on the camera. Like they're like memeing. They're like, you know, everyone already has like the GIF in their mind of like what their interview is going to look like.
Yeah. What's the best GIF from this episode?
Oh God.
Is there anything? Is there anything that should be a GIF from the episode?
Oh man, that's a really good question. I mean, Richard like swinging his like legs on the tree while everyone else
that should be a GIF. Or Suhawk like cutting her hair with a knife.
That's the GIF.
Need a quarantine haircut. Like, so then, who gave the best confessionals, Steven?
I mean, probably Rudy, even out of the gate, right? Like,
yeah, he is the one that's like, you know, I got to get along with them. There's more of them than there is of me. And he says, I don't even know what MTV means.
Yeah, those are great. He's like, what a one-liner machine. I mean, he's good.
Yeah.
And Sue was good too.
What do you think he thinks it means?
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, the TV part is easy.
Right. It could be
really
like,
just, can he solve for M?
Yeah. That's a tough one. Yeah. What from Rudy's point of view, what could that be?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't think he was that curious.
Moxie
TV.
TV.
These young people, they got so much moxie.
And Sue was great too with like that confessional after Kelly and Stacey approach her, and she's like, you know, she kind of gives like a sly smile about how she's going to betray them.
And Hatch is great in the confessionals also.
God.
He's talking constantly about his cockiness. Like he's very self-aware about how his cockiness is coming across.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, obviously like you might as well, I've already won the game. Like the only question is how I'm going to get there is an amazing confessional. Like write me the $1 million check now.
Yeah.
And then his other confessional about like, if they think Rudy's cocky, you know, like I'm really screwed, you know, like, yeah, just like very self-aware and also very good at like one of the earliest people to really separate their confessional persona from their in-game persona. You know, I feel like he, you know, really like he kind of hammed it up a little bit in the confessionals in a good way.
Yeah. Hatch is great all through this first episode and throughout most of the season.
Yeah, I mean, you know, inventing the strategic game of Survivor. Yeah,
that's at the height of his powers.
Yeah,
really fun. What about the challenge, Steven? Did you enjoy the challenge here? I feel like that they really struggled with at least the coverage of this challenge.
Yeah, it really took me back to doing the same challenge in Survivor 31. We did this challenge. There was a puzzle at the end, of course. There was like a key thing.
Yeah, we did a similar version in Survivor All Stars.
That makes sense. It's like very confusing what was happening at any given time.
Yeah, I think that they really had to like if you go back and I think this is probably the thing that holds up the worst going through the challenge, where I do not think that where they, you know, don't miss a beat currently on how to cover these challenges. I think that they really were not prepared for what this was going to be like to cover this.
Yeah, I mean, what do you think of one thing that's, you know, perhaps the most notable difference, immediately notable difference, I would say, is no commentary from Jeff. You know, no. What do you think about?
Yeah, that's not there for a little bit.
Yeah, but did you like not having that, or do you like Jeff's heckling, or do you not like it?
No, I think you need Jeff's commentary on it, because I think you need to help to process what's going on. Like if you had like maybe like an overhead angle, or sort of like be able to like sort of like cue in on who's necessarily like having problems in the challenge. I think you need the Jeff commentary.
Yeah, I totally agree. It makes it like so much. It brings it to life so much. And you know, for years Jeff got, you know, a lot of crap from fans for like inserting himself too much into the challenge. But watching it without his commentary, it's like, you know, it feels very like stilted almost.
Steven, he even says like, "Hey guys, just make sure you do everything right because I don't want to have to make a judgment call here."
And now it's like I've got judgments. I got judgments to call. Yeah.
I'll make a judgment call. Yeah. Jeff is just so super nice to all the survivors the whole way through.
Like through this season.
Throughout this episode especially, but
it
seems like very much like, hey, no matter what happens, you guys made it this far in the journey, so don't let anybody take that away from you.
Yeah. And like, what's amazing to me is how many of the elements of the show are like in place, like the catchphrases, the tribe is spoken, like, big stakes, whatever, like so many of these things that he said in this first episode have persisted 20 years later.
Steven, what do you make of the giant treasure chest full of cash?
Those are the corny elements that I think
they should bring it back. I really think they should. Like, it's like, oh, that was corny. You don't think that like they would have sat there, winners at war, $2 million in cash? Like, let me remind you guys what you're playing for here.
A second treasure chest comes out.
Do you see all the cash that's right here?
What if it rains?
I don't know. Maybe they could have it like a lucite safe. See through.
In Vegas back in the day, Benny Binion's had like $1 million in cash, and it was a big draw for tourists. And I think it was like in like some sort of like a glass enclosure. I think
maybe it's like Ben is thinking about stepping down. It's like, all right, Ben, could I just point your eyes over to this $2 million in cash right here?
Yeah,
just take a look.
Yeah,
people might go crazy.
Well, if someone might make a run for it, if it's right there, all you have to do is grab it and then go.
Yeah.
What do you think about this? Jungle.
How about this for an idea? Okay. It's an endurance challenge, and Jeff comes out with $10,000 in cash. Not peanut butter, cold hard cash.
Wow, that's interesting because the incentives suddenly change.
Yeah.
I don't know, because then it actually might be the correct move to quit. What's great about the food is that it's like strategically it's always the wrong move, but like sometimes just for like as a human, as an animal, it is the right move.
How about this? What if we just geniusify the fire tokens? Okay, so fire token equals 20 grand. You get to the end, you win the game. It's an extra even if you don't win. Even if you don't win, we get to the final three.
Oh, I like that a lot. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, because then it's like, do I use this to buy an idol, which can get me further, or do I just like hoard money?
Yeah.
I like that idea.
That's interesting.
I don't
know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Steven, anything else about the first episode of Survivor in terms of the strategy? Who got the fishy?
I'm going to give the fishy. I think you've got to give it. Well, let's see. It's like, who drove the vote, right? I mean, Sue kind of made the big move. She jumped alliances, but I think that may come back to bite her, with, I think Stacey's not going to be very happy about that. And that might really screw Sue over later on in the game.
Yeah.
We kind of wanted to give it to Richard because he won, but he's the only person who didn't vote with one of the alliances. We don't even know if he's in on the vote necessarily.
Yeah. I don't think if we were doing this on the night of May 31st, 2000, I don't think we can give Richard the fishy.
Yeah. Kind of want to give it to you might have to give it to Sue just because, like, who else?
Yeah.
But like, Rudy almost got voted out, so you don't really want to give it to Rudy. You're not going to give it to like Dirk or Sean. So yeah, I think probably Sue. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you have to give it to Sue. Maybe let's stop down and talk a little bit about Stacey. Of course, Stacey Stillman, such a controversial figure in Survivor lore. She brings up the lawsuit against the show after the season is over. She says that she was pressured, or she said that she thought that the show production or Mark Burnett were pressuring people to keep Rudy because after the first two senior citizens got voted off, they were worried they would lose senior citizens. To be honest, I don't know exactly like what the outcome of that case was. But
I think they settled, and like I think she's under like she can't talk, right? Like there was some settlement, and it was part of the part
still?
of that settlement. I think it was like forever. Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, they're releasing UFO footage now.
I know. But the Stacey Stillman, there will be aliens walking the earth, but Stacey Stillman will never be able to reveal what really happened at that tribal council.
But anyway, so Stacey Stillman, she's got this alliance going, but Suhawk does not like her.
Oh, yeah. I feel like I think that's a correct read from. I mean, you can see this, like, Kelly and Stacey are sort of bonding as being like the younger women on the tribe, and I think that, like, Sue correctly reads that, like, she is not going to connect with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would love to see more about Stacey Stillman. She seems like she was probably like one of the smarter people that are out there. She's like a young lawyer, right?
Yeah. And yeah, from San Francisco.
Yeah, she is here in this season. Yeah, I guess she's 27 or 28 from San Francisco. And she is a lawyer, but it just seems like that nobody liked her really on Tagi. Except for Kelly.
Except for Kelly, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and probably Sonia too, right?
Yeah.
Because that trio, it could have gone far. Could have gone far.
Yeah.
That would have been a very interesting trio.
Yeah. Okay. But ultimately, she tried to vote out Rudy here. Bad move to vote out the Rootster.
Yeah. She did seem like she could have been like a really fun presence. They should bring her back.
Oh,
that would be a real
bring her back
twist. Yeah, like bring her back for legends.
Yeah. Did Kelly Wigglesworth speak highly of Stacey Stillman at all?
I don't think we ever asked her about Stacey. I mean, which is kind of crazy, right? Like, I mean, you just all the questions I should have asked Kelly that I can never.
Yeah,
ask.
I forgot to ask Sue Hawk also.
Yeah.
What are you going to
do? Yeah.
I found that the Survivor alumni did not really like to get peppered with a lot of questions. That's why I had to start this podcast. Well, on the island, I thought they didn't like it. They felt like I was annoying. Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, that is funny. It's funny because like now everyone wants to talk about their experience, like that's all people want to talk about.
You're like, oh, this guy is so annoying.
Yeah, it's funny.
All he wants to do is talk about Survivor.
Yeah, well, the problem was that that at the time there wasn't thousands of people listening. I guess there were probably millions of people listening at the time. Actually, there were like 14 million people.
Yeah, but they didn't want us to talk about Survivor. Also, I think that they would also get mad if you were talking about Survivor.
Yeah, like this will never make air.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Stephen Fishback. Anything else you want to say?
Let's see. Who do we miss? Iconic first vote from Sue Hawk, Suna.
Yeah.
First vote of the show.
It took them a little bit until they ultimately get the parchment figured out. A couple people are like folding the parchment like into like a folded again and again, like crumpling it up very tiny. It seems like very much like it's written on tissue paper. There's rain. The torch is going in the hole too far.
Yeah, and Jeff was like, I don't know if he ordered it for drama. Like, did he? Because like he was like, it's even like, I mean, I guess the final vote was the decisive vote, so it must have been to some degree ordered for drama. But
yeah, it came up Sonia, Stacey, Sonia,
yeah,
Rudy, Sonia.
I guess that does order for drama because then suddenly all those Rudy votes coming through, you're inclined to think Rudy. Mm-hmm. It's funny. There was also like more of a beat when he's reading it. He's like really reading it, really looking at it with this in this episode.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that's season 1, episode 1 of Survivor, and we did a know-it-alls about the premiere of Survivor. Stephen, can you believe it?
Wow. And were we right? Were we right about who's going to win?
Yeah. Well, Stephen,
your prediction.
I think that Rich really does get the winner's edit here in the first episode. When you go back.
Oh, but I actually do not think he's getting a winner's.
Who got the winner edit? Dr. Sean?
I mean, I don't know. Like, who? Because here's the thing. Like, I do not think today they would show a winner being so out of touch with his tribe. On typically in this day and age, the winner in the first episode gets like a kind of a segment about like their personality, like a humanizing segment about them and their background. And Rich was shown to be kind of an outcast and like somewhat disconnected from the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's the strength of the first season is that they really made him a villain. And
nobody thought Richard would win the first season, right?
No. Yeah. I mean, he was like everyone hated. I mean, I was rooting for Richard so hard, but he was like truly like people were like enraged. Like it's like how people felt about Tony. I think during Cagayan, like just like who is this like madman?
Yeah.
but I don't know who's getting the winner's edit. Maybe Sue.
Sue with the winners. Yeah, I thought Dr. Sean came across very well when he was patching up Sonia. Yeah, interesting. Also, it seems like that you have to get medical treatment from the doctor that's on your team.
Yeah, exactly.
Gretchen
had a very good edit.
Yeah, well, that's why when Gretchen gets voted out, it's a big deal too.
Yeah.
So, all right, there you go. All right, we'll continue our discussion of Survivor Season 1, Episode 1 with Josh Wigler on the Wiggle Room on Monday. We'll listen to your wand-offs coming up about Season 1, Episode 1. How about that? Good idea or no, Steve?
Sorry. I was like, I guess someone started texting me something. Sorry, that's great. It sounds really good.
All right, Stephen. Of course, also in terms of season 40 coverage, we have a ton now of our season 40 deep dive interviews. I've now spoken with Kim. I've talked with Wendell by way of the Purple Pants podcast with Bryce this week. I spoke with Adam Klein for 3.5 hours. Spoke with Ethan. Spoke with Michelle Fitzgerald, and we just spoke with your friend and mine, Sophie Clark, this weekend.
Yeah, what an incredible series of podcasts.
Yeah, and we're working on lining up more. Steven, do you feel like that had you sat Sophie at the same table as Jeremy and Tyson at your wedding, do you feel like that would have changed Winners at War?
Yeah, probably. I actually feel like most things that happen in the world are largely based on my wedding seating.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that any result, if I had just moved one person to a,
they might have just been able to sort of like break bread for that, at your wedding.
I think it all comes back down to the zoo. Who didn't go to the zoo?
Yeah. All right. Well, really great chat with Sophie. Be sure to check that out as well. Plus, not to mention, we will also have our News AF coming up this week, and soon a return of Talking with T-Bird. So plenty of stuff going on over at robhasawebsite.com. Stephen, this was so much fun to get to talk to you tonight.
This was great. This was really, really fun. Such a fun look back at the show. I enjoyed talking about episode 1. I enjoyed reminiscing about our respective first seasons of Survivor. I'm deeply ashamed that I ever was a Mike Skupin fan. I retract all enthusiasm for Mike Skupin, retroactively and in perpetuity. Truly. Anyway, yeah.
All right, Stephen. So nice to talk to you. When will we speak again?
I hope you and I can just talk whenever. Like, give me a call. Okay. I'll give you a call.
Oh, okay. That's good. I like that. All right. Leave everybody else out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right. There you go.
We could record the call and then just, podcast, put it up.
Okay. All right. What should we do? Have drinks over Zoom?
Yeah. Zoom drinks. I love it. Well, we were going to do like a double dinner date with our respective wives. And now that's no longer possible. So.
Okay. All right. Well, one day, Stephen. All right. So thank you so much for checking this out. We'll be back on tomorrow with Josh Wigler for the Wiggle Room. Take care, everybody. Have a good one.
Sorry about the glare. Anyone who's watching this.
Yeah, I think we're good. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.